They say fame is a mirror that reflects everything except the truth. I learned that at 15, when the cameras first turned toward me and never looked away. By the time I was 21, I'd been photographed more times than I could count, analyzed in languages I didn't speak, and dissected by people who'd never met me. I became a brand before I became a woman, a myth before I was allowed to be human. But this isn't a story about fame. It's about the night everything changed. The night I met someone who didn't see Kylie Jenner, the construct. He saw me. It was February in Los Angeles, one of those perfect 70-degree evenings that make you forget the rest of the world exists. The jacarandas hadn't bloomed yet, but you could feel spring waiting just beneath the surface of the city. I was at a private screening in Beverly Hills, the kind where everyone pretends they're there for the art, but spends most of the time networking over champagne they don't drink and canapes they don't eat. I almost didn't go. Stormy had been clingy that day, the way 3-year-olds get when they sense their mom needs them more than she needs her. We'd spent the afternoon in the backyard of my Hidden Hills house, making potions out of pool water and rose petals, her little hands covered in glitter from an art project we'd abandoned halfway through. When I kissed her goodnight and told her Mommy had to go to a work thing, she grabbed my hand with both of hers and said, "Stay." God, how I wanted to stay. But the appearance had been locked in for weeks. My team reminded me it was important. Visibility at cultural events, they called it. So I put on the black Saint Laurent dress that had been selected for me, let my glam team work their magic until I looked like the version of myself the world expected, and drove the 20 minutes from Hidden Hills to Beverly Hills, watching the transition from suburban perfection to urban sophistication through tinted windows. The venue was one of those converted mansions on North Crescent Drive that Hollywood loves to use for intimate gatherings. Valet attendants in black vests, security that blended into the shadows, the kind of discretion money buys in a city that runs on attention. I remember walking up those limestone steps, the click of my heels echoing in the evening air, and feeling that familiar tightness in my chest, the one that comes when you're about to perform being yourself for an audience that thinks they already know the script. Inside, the usual suspects mingled in carefully orchestrated casual groups. Producers, actors, the kinds of influencers who'd transcended social media to become something else entirely. Everyone's face did that subtle shift when they saw me. The recognition, the calculation, the decision about whether to approach or play it cool. I found my spot by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the garden, champagne flute in hand, prop more than drink, and did what I always did at these things. Smiled, nodded, engaged in conversations that skimmed the surface like stones on water. We talked about projects, travel, the new sushi place on Cannon Drive that everyone pretended to have discovered first. Safe topics. Surface topics. Then I saw him. He was standing alone by the outdoor terrace, looking at his phone with the kind of focus that suggested he was reading something that mattered. Not scrolling, not performing, just reading. His hair caught the amber light from the heat lamps they'd set up outside, dark curls that looked like he'd run his hands through them one too many times. He was wearing a simple navy sweater and black jeans, expensive in that understated way that suggested he'd grabbed them without thinking about it. Timothée Chalamet. I knew who he was, of course. You couldn't exist in Los Angeles without knowing the faces that mattered. But seeing him there, unguarded and unperforming, was different than seeing him on a screen or a red carpet. He looked tired, not physically, but in that bone-deep way that comes from carrying other people's expectations on your shoulders. I recognized that exhaustion. I saw it in my own mirror every morning. I wasn't going to approach him. That's not what I do with these things. I let people come to me. It's safer that way. Easier to control the narrative, to maintain the careful distance that's kept me sane in an insane world. But something about the way he stood there, separate from everyone else despite being surrounded by people, pulled at something in my chest. Before I could second-guess myself, I was walking across the room, weaving through conversations and air kisses until I was standing beside him on the terrace. The February air was cool against my skin, a relief after the carefully climate-controlled interior. "Hiding?" I asked. He looked up from his phone, and for a second, I saw the same recognition, calculation flash across his face, but then it disappeared, replaced with something that looked almost like relief. Is it that obvious? His voice had that particular quality I'd only heard in interviews. Soft, considered, like he thought about each word before releasing it into the world. Only to someone else who's doing the same thing, I said, leaning against the stone balustrade. Below us, Beverly Hills spread out in neat grids of manicured perfection, porch lights beginning to flicker on as the sun made its daily descent behind the Pacific. He smiled then, not the practiced smile I'd seen in photographs, but something smaller, more real. I didn't think you ever hid. You always seemed so comfortable in all this. The laugh that escaped me was bitter before I could catch it. That's the point, isn't it? To seem comfortable, to seem a lot of things. He turned to look at me fully then, and there was something in his eyes, green with flecks of brown, I noticed, that made me feel seen in a way that had nothing to do with being looked at. There's a difference, I'd learned, between being observed and being seen. One makes you a specimen, the other makes you human. I watched your documentary, he said suddenly, then seemed surprised he'd said it. The one where you talk about your anxiety, about feeling like you're performing your own life. No one ever brought that up at these things. They talked about my businesses, my family, the empire I'd built before I could legally drink. But never the documentary where I'd let the camera see me panic about leaving my house, where I'd admitted that sometimes I didn't recognize the person the world had decided I was. That was, a pause, trying to find the right word. A mistake, probably. Too much truth for a world that prefers the fiction. Or exactly the right amount of truth for people who need to hear it, he countered. I had my first panic attack on a red carpet in Venice. Hundreds of people screaming my name, and all I could think about was whether I remembered how to breathe. The admission hung between us, unexpected and raw. Below, someone's Lamborghini roared down the street, the sound cutting through the carefully curated playlist drifting from inside. How do you do it? I asked. The constant performance of being yourself for people who think they own pieces of you. He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the city lights beginning to compete with the fading sunset. I create boundaries, small ones, spaces where I can exist without being Timothée Chalamet, you know? I read poetry in coffee shops in Las Feliz, where no one cares who you are as long as you don't take the good seats. I walk Griffith Park at dawn when it's just dog walkers and runners. I protect the parts of myself that aren't for sale. Must be nice to be able to disappear, I said, and couldn't keep the envy out of my voice. I haven't been able to go to a coffee shop without security since I was 17. But you've built something, he said, turning to face me again. Not just businesses, but a world where you make the rules. That's power. Is it? Or is it just a prettier cage? A group of people spilled onto the terrace then, their laughter sharp and bright in the evening air. I recognized two of them, actors who'd been trying to get Kendall's attention for months. They saw us and hesitated, clearly debating whether to approach. Want to get out of here? Timothée asked suddenly. I looked at him, surprised. Together? Why not? Two people hiding at the same party might as well hide somewhere more interesting. Every rational part of my brain screamed no. Leaving together would create stories, rumors, the kind of speculation that would follow me for weeks. My publicist would have a field day of damage control. But something in his eyes, that mix of exhaustion and rebellion and genuine interest, made me want to say yes. Where would we go? Anywhere that isn't here. I thought about Stormy, safe and sleeping in her princess bed. Thought about the security team that followed me everywhere, the cameras that materialized whenever I appeared in public. Thought about the carefully controlled life I'd built to protect myself from exactly this kind of spontaneous decision. Then I thought about the last time I'd done something just because I wanted to, without calculating the cost in public perception. I couldn't remember. Okay, I said, the word escaping before my better judgment could catch it. But I'm driving. My security wasn't happy. I could see it in Marcus's eyes as I told him I was leaving, alone, and that he should follow at a distance. He'd been with me for 3 years, had seen me through breakups and business launches, knew all my tells when anxiety was creeping up my spine. But he also knew better than to argue when I used that particular tone. The one that reminded everyone that despite the age I'd entered this world, I was the one signing the checks. Timothée had slipped out through the service entrance while I made my excuses inside, claiming a sudden migraine that no one believed but everyone accepted. It's the thing about Los Angeles. Everyone's always leaving for somewhere better, and no one takes it personally. I found him waiting by my car, a matte black Bentley that suddenly seemed absurdly conspicuous for whatever this was. Subtle, he said, but he was smiling. I left the rolls at home, I deadpanned, and was rewarded with a laugh that seemed to surprise him. We drove in silence at first, heading west on Sunset toward the ocean. The city streamed past in neon and shadows, the pink palace of the Beverly Hills Hotel, the familiar chaos of the Strip, the moment where the buildings gave way to the winding darkness of the canyon roads. I'd driven this route 1,000 times, but never with someone who seemed content to just exist in the quiet with me. Do you ever think about what you'd be doing if you weren't you? He asked as we passed the turnoff for Bel Air. All the time, I admitted. I have this fantasy where I'm a makeup artist, not the owner of a cosmetics empire, just someone who makes people feel beautiful for their wedding day or their prom. Small moments, personal ones. That's what you were doing anyway, wasn't it? Just on a massive scale. No, I said, maybe too sharply. What I do is sell the idea that beauty is achievable if you buy the right products. What I wanted to do was show people they were already beautiful. We were in Pacific Palisades now, the ocean a dark promise ahead of us. I pulled into a small parking area near Will Rogers Beach, empty except for a few cars belonging to night surfers or people with nowhere else to be. The beach at night, very Los Angeles noir. It's the only time it belongs to locals, I explained, killing the engine. During the day, it's a tourist postcard. At night, it remembers what it was before we all showed up to ruin it. We walked down to the sand, my heels sinking immediately. I stopped to take them off, and he steadied me with a hand on my elbow. A brief contact that somehow felt more intimate than anything I had experienced in months. The ocean was loud and dark, waves crashing with the kind of persistence that reminded you that, long after the city crumbled, the water would still be here, pulling and pushing at the land like a conversation that would never end. I grew up coming to this beach, I said, surprising myself with the admission. Before the show, before everything, my dad would bring us here on Sunday mornings. We'd get breakfast burritos from this place on Pico and eat them on the sand while he told us stories about when he was young and broke in L.A., before he met my mom. Do you miss it? The before? I thought about lying, giving the practiced answer about being grateful for opportunities and blessed by success, but something about the darkness and the sound of the waves made the truth easier. I miss being able to make mistakes without them becoming headlines. I miss being able to change my mind without disappointing millions of people. I paused, trying to find the words. I miss being a work in progress instead of a finished product. He sat down on the sand, expensive jeans be damned, and after a moment I joined him, my designer dress immediately collecting sand and salt and probably ruining itself. I found I didn't care. You know what I think? He said, staring out at the invisible horizon. I think we're all just pretending to be finished products. The only difference is you have to pretend in front of more people. That's a lonely thought. Or a liberating one. If everyone's pretending, then none of us are really failing at being real. A wave larger than the rest crashed closer to us, the foam reaching for our feet before retreating.
I pulled my knees to my chest, a gesture that probably looked defensive but felt necessary. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why did you really ask me to leave with you?" He was quiet long enough that I wondered if he'd answer at all. When he did speak, his voice was different, lower, more uncertain. "Because you looked like you were drowning in that room, and I recognized the expression. Because I've been in Los Angeles for 2 years, and I haven't had a real conversation with anyone who understands what it's like to lose yourself in becoming what everyone needs you to be. Because..." He paused, running his hand through his hair in what I was beginning to recognize as his tell for discomfort. "Because when you laughed about leaving the roles at home, it was the first time all night anyone sounded like an actual person instead of a character they were playing." The honesty of it hit me like the cold wind coming off the water. In my world, people didn't admit to loneliness, to recognition, to the desperate hunger for authentic connection. We networked, we collaborated, we vibed, but we never admitted to needing each other in ways that couldn't be commodified or posted about. "I don't know how to do this," I said quietly. "Do what?" "Be real with someone who doesn't want something from me. Everyone always wants something. A photo, a follow, an investment, an endorsement, access to my family. Even when they think they don't, they do. What makes you think I don't want something?" I turned to look at him, ready to be disappointed, to have this moment revealed as another transaction in a life full of them. But his eyes were serious, waiting. "I want to know who you are when you're not being Kylie Jenner. I want to have a conversation that doesn't feel like it's being performed for an invisible audience. I want..." He paused, then smiled, self-deprecating. "I want to sit on this beach and talk to someone who understands why I sometimes forget my own name because I've said it so many times it doesn't feel like it belongs to me anymore."
Enjoying the story? Hit the like button, subscribe, drop your comment, and turn on the notifications. Let's keep going. We stayed on that beach for 3 hours until the cold became unbearable and my phone had accumulated 17 missed calls from various members of my team. In that time, something shifted. Not dramatically, not with fireworks or declarations, but quietly. The way important things usually happen when you're not paying attention. He told me about growing up in Manhattan, how he'd been a normal kid until he wasn't, how fame had hit him like a wave he was still learning to swim in rather than drown under. I told him about the weight of being the youngest in a family of giants, how I'd built an empire partly out of ambition, but mostly out of the need to have something that was unquestionably mine. "The thing about having everything," I said, watching a seagull pick at something in the sand, illuminated by the moon, "is that people assume you have nothing to complain about. Like material success somehow cancels out human complexity. Or that emotional pain is somehow less valid if you experience it in a mansion," he added. "Exactly. God forbid you admit to depression when you have 7 cars and a private jet. The comment sections will eat you alive for being ungrateful." "Comment sections," he repeated, shaking his head. "Modern society's version of the Roman Colosseum. Blood sport for the digital age." A couple walked past us, probably locals from the way they didn't give us a second glance despite our increasingly disheveled formal wear. Their dog, some kind of retriever mix, bounded over to investigate us. Timothy immediately lit up, that studied coolness disappearing entirely as he ruffled the dog's ears. "You're a good one, aren't you?" he murmured to the dog, who was now trying to climb into his lap despite being far too large for it. "Sorry about him," the owner called out. "He thinks everyone exists to pet him." "He's not wrong," Timothy called back, and the couple laughed, continuing their walk. Watching him with the dog, unguarded and simply happy, I felt something crack in my chest. When was the last time I'd been that unconsciously joyful about something so simple? "I want a dog," he said, as the retriever bounded after its owners. "But I travel too much. It wouldn't be fair." "I have 7."
I admitted. They're the only ones who don't care about my follower count. 7? What can I say? I have a hard time saying no to a rescue face. My house in Hidden Hills is basically a very expensive dog park. He laughed, then grew serious again. Can I tell you something terrible? Please. Sometimes I forget I'm a real person. Like, I'll catch myself thinking about Timothée Chalamet in the third person, as if he's a character I play. I'll be in my apartment, making coffee, and suddenly think, this is the apartment where Timothée Chalamet lives, like I'm a tourist in my own life. The words hung between us, raw and true in a way that made my chest tight. I understood exactly what he meant. That dissociation, that strange split between who you are and who you perform. I have this thing, I said slowly, where I watch my own Instagram stories to see what kind of day Kylie Jenner is having. Like she's someone else, someone I need to keep track of, make sure she's maintaining the right image, saying the right things. Sometimes I envy her. She always seems so confident, so sure of herself. But that's you. Is it? Or is it a really sophisticated performance that I've gotten so good I've fooled even myself? My phone buzzed again. Marcus, probably having a mild panic attack about my location. The responsible thing would be to respond, to reassure everyone that I was safe, to go home and return to the life that was waiting for me like a perfectly tailored straitjacket. Instead, I turned my phone completely off, something I hadn't done in years. There's this place, Timothée said suddenly, in Las Vegas. It's a 24-hour diner that hasn't been renovated since the 70s. Terrible coffee, amazing pie, and absolutely no one who cares about anything that happened after 1985. Want to go? Dressed like this? I gestured to our sand-covered formal wear. Especially dressed like this. We'll tell them we're coming from a failed heist or a very specific themed wedding. The laugh that bubbled up from my chest felt foreign and familiar at once, like remembering a language I'd forgotten I knew. Okay, I said, but if someone recognizes us, then we'll deal with it, like regular people do, awkwardly and with too much explanation. As we walked back to my car, he told me about the first time he'd been recognized in public, buying toilet paper at a CVS in the valley, of all things. The absurdity of it, trying to maintain dignity while holding a 20-pack of Charmin and taking selfies. I told him about my first paparazzi encounter, how I was buying tampons at a Rite Aid in Calabasas, and the photos ended up in a tabloid with the headline, Kylie's Time of the Month. We were laughing as we got in the car, the kind of laughter that comes from recognizing your own absurdity in someone else's experience. But as I started the engine, he grew quiet. What? I asked. This is going to sound weird, but I feel like I should warn you that I'm probably going to screw this up. Screw what up? Whatever this is. This connection. I have a talent for overthinking things until they break, for needing things to mean something so badly that they end up meaning nothing. I turned to look at him fully, this beautiful, complicated person that had somehow made me forget for a few hours that I was supposed to be untouchable. Good, I said. Perfect people are exhausting. Screw it up. Make mistakes. Be human with me. He smiled then, soft and genuine. With you, I think I could remember how. The drive to Las Vegas was quiet, but comfortable. The city flowing past us like a river of light. At every red light, I fought the urge to turn my phone back on, to return to the safety of being Kylie Jenner, the construct, the brand, the myth. But then I'd look over at him, this beautiful, complicated person that had somehow seen through all of that to the girl underneath, who just wanted to sit on a beach and admit she was lonely.
That night at the diner changed everything. And nothing, all at once. We sat in a cracked vinyl booth, eating pie that tasted like nostalgia and drinking coffee that could strip paint, talking until the sun came up over Los Angeles like a promise. The waitress, a woman named Dolores who'd clearly seen everything the city had to offer and remained unimpressed, didn't even blink at our formal wear or the sand we tracked in. She just kept refilling our coffee and occasionally patting Timothy on the shoulder like he was a grandson who needed feeding. He was right. No one there cared who we were. We were just two kids, really, despite our empires and our fame, trying to figure out how to be human in a world that demanded we be symbols. I learned that he wrote poetry on hotel stationery during press tours, that he called his grandmother every Sunday from whatever time zone he was in, that he sometimes sat in his car in the parking lot of Whole Foods for an hour, just watching normal people do normal things, trying to remember what that felt like. He learned that I sang Stormy to sleep with the same songs my mom sang to me, that I kept a journal no one knew about where I wrote letters to my future self, that sometimes I dreamed about disappearing entirely, starting over in a small town where no one knew my last name. We didn't kiss that night, didn't make any promises or declarations. But when he finally got an Uber back to wherever his real life was waiting, and I drove home to Hidden Hills as the city woke up around me, I knew something fundamental had shifted. Marcus was waiting for me, of course, trying to look stern, but mostly looking relieved. My phone, when I finally turned it back on, was a chaos of concern and speculation. But for once, I didn't immediately dive into damage control. Instead, I went to Stormy's room, watched her sleep for a moment, perfect and unmarked by the world's expectations, then crawled into my own bed as the sun climbed higher over the valley. That was 6 months ago. Since then, Timothy and I have become something the world struggles to categorize. Not quite dating, but not just friends. We meet at that diner once a week, sometimes more, always late at night when the city shows its true face. We talk about everything and nothing. He reads me poems by people I've never heard of. I show him pictures Stormy draws of Mommy's friend with the crazy hair. The media has theories, of course. They've captured us entering and leaving various places, always separately but within suspicious time frames. They've analyzed our body language at the 3 public events we've both attended. They've created narratives and timelines and evidence boards that would make conspiracy theorists proud. But they don't know the night on the beach when he made me remember I was a person before I was a brand. They don't know about the terrible coffee and the way Dolores now saves us our booth. They don't know about the Tuesday at 3 a.m. when I had a panic attack about Stormy starting school, and he sat with me on FaceTime for 2 hours, not trying to fix anything, just being there. What I learned from Timothy, what we learned together, is that intimacy isn't about possession or performance. It's about the sacred space between 2 people where you can stop being who the world needs you to be and remember who you actually are. It's about finding someone who sees through your carefully constructed armor to the soft, scared, hopeful human underneath and says, "There you are. I've been looking for you." Fame is still a mirror that reflects everything but the truth. But now, in the quiet moments when the cameras are gone and the world isn't watching, I have someone who helps me remember what's real. Someone who knows that Kylie Jenner is just a very elaborate costume I wear, and that underneath it all, I'm just a girl who wants to be seen, known, and loved for who I really am. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's everything. In a city built on illusions, finding one person who insists on truth is a revolution. In a life where everyone wants something from you, finding someone who just wants you, messy, imperfect, overthinking you, is its own kind of miracle. Timothy didn't save me. That's not how real life works, despite what the movies sell us. But he did something better. He reminded me that I was worth saving and that maybe, just maybe, I could be the one to do it. The cameras are still there. The expectations haven't disappeared. The weight of being Kylie Jenner hasn't magically lifted. But now, when I look in the mirror, I sometimes catch glimpses of the girl on the beach, sand in her designer dress, laughing at the absurdity of it all. She looks happy. She looks real. She looks like someone I'd like to know.
If you watched until here, thank you. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love reading your messages. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications so you never miss another story like this. And if you'd like to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee. Any amount helps a lot. Link in the pinned comment.